the detail of the Rock in the movie. I thought that was not the Rock, Dwayne the Rock Johnson.
Yeah, The Rock shows up. He's actually in the movie.
He's actually in the movie. Spoiler alert, it's Maximilian Kolbe. What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Logos Podcast. This is Father Max.
This is Father Joseph.
And on today's episode, we've got a fun and awesome and even perhaps special guest with you all. We have Anthony. Would it be director of Triumph of the Heart?
That's right, yeah.
Director of Triumph of the Heart, a movie on the life of St. Maximilian Kolbe, which I've had a chance to see most of last night. So I'm excited to get to talk to you about that. So yeah.
I'm super excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, Anthony, it's really good to have you, man. For our listeners, how do you pronounce your last name? I think Father Max didn't say it because he was afraid to butcher
He was like, he kind of was gearing up and he was like, I don't want to mess this one up. Yeah. D'Ambrosio. You know, you just have to roll the R and use the hand, and that's
D'Ambrosio.
how. Yeah, there you go.
Bing, bada boom, forget about it.
There you go.
It's awesome, man. Well, we're really excited to have you on the show. We're excited to talk to Anthony about this movie, this film about Maximilian Kolbe, as Father Max said. Before we do, just welcome to the podcast. This is Logos Podcast. We're really excited that you're listening to us. We are a podcast about the Logos, about the truth, which is, geared towards introducing you to the truth, goodness, and beauty of the intellectual and spiritual tradition of the Catholic Church. Father Max and I are Catholic priests, and we like talking about stuff, philosophy, theology, culture, and this film fits right into that conversation, which is why we're so pumped to have Anthony here. If you would, just before we go any further, if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel, that would be very helpful. If you'd like to support the podcast, that'd be great. And now, without further ado, let's just get into it, because this guy's a busy man right now. It's like Super Bowl season for him. Anthony, first, just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit of background. Who are you? How'd you get into doing this?
Yeah. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I am basically just a Catholic homeschool kid. I grew up with my dad as a theology professor at the University of Dallas in the Catholic kind of conservative homeschool community. I rebelled a lot in high school, went to public school, and became an emo punk rocker and played in a band. My dream was to go to Warped Tour, and then was sort of blasted.
Warped Tour, dude. I went to two of those. Wow.
Nice, yeah. The mosh pits, the side bangs, the whole thing, man.
Too much grease. Too much grease for a human being.
Yeah, that's very true. Very greasy place, Warped Tour.
Very greasy people.
Well, that was a delightful experience for many of us, but that had to sort of fall to the wayside with a higher calling. I ended up kind of meeting the Lord through a Steubenville retreat and Life Teen in high school, and then went to seminary, studied for 4 years, got a philosophy degree. Did that. I had a haircut just like you guys. I'm sure that you experienced. It was a very intense transformation. I went from side bangs and like eyeliner with
wait. You did the eyeliner?
I was one of those kids.
You were committed to the game.
Dude, I was committed, man. We were like, I'm telling you, man, we were on our way to Warped Tour. We actually, I mean, it's kind of a fun testimony for the high schoolers. But nobody, it's like totally irrelevant now. Like nobody cares about that. Back in 2013 or whatever, it was a really cool testimony.
Yeah. But it's like the week of Warped Tour. Me and my buddies knew you were going to Warped Tour if you had the checkered Vans on.
Yes, that's how you did.
Or like the DC skate shoes, then you were in. This episode is powered by, fueled by, inspired by Augustine Institute.
Actually, it's inspired by Jesus Christ, but we do want to introduce you to the Augustine Institute because they will help you get to know him.
That's so good. Check them out at augustine.edu/logos for more information. Now, back to the episode.
See, but I feel like right now it's like everybody's super into the 80s and 90s, but like in another decade, everybody's going to be back to like the thousands for the cool thing. punk rock and pop punk and all that. But anyway, so my band was like actually kind of getting a certain amount of like fame, and we were gonna be signed to actually go on the tour. But God really, that was like when I met God, and had that sort of transformation. The band went to Warped Tour. I went to seminary. It was a little bit like don't look back at Sodom and Gomorrah. You know, like the guitarist would call me every summer and be like, "Man, you should like come on tour with us. Like rejoin the band, quit seminary." But
Wow.
no, I really believed. I really like loved. I loved it. I loved the sort of the intellectual tradition, the liturgical cycle and calendar, just everything that I was experiencing about like meeting God there and the community of it just really felt like, wow, this is the truth. This is the place that I want to be. But yeah, I left that with this sense of, and for people who sort of are like getting to know the faith, I think one of the things that I was as sort of a freshman Catholic in a way, I just thought the priesthood was the missionary sort of, if you wanted to be a hardcore Catholic, you have to be a priest. And as I matured in that, I realized that actually like marriage is the front lines. That's the salt of the earth. And the priesthood is sort of the service of the sacraments to those people to give them the bread of life that they need to kind of endure that race out in the kind of wilderness in a way, bringing the kingdom to earth. And when I really began to understand that and see marriage and family as sort of the front lines where culture could be shifted, and in particular, like art and creativity, I really was like drawn to that and wanted to be kind of the next C.S. Lewis or J.R.R. Tolkien. And anyway, I as one does when one leaves seminary at senior year, I was like, well, I can do youth ministry or I can teach theology, you know.
I know a whole lot of philosophy, but that's not going to help me fix a computer.
Yeah, exactly. So I got into youth ministry and was like getting onto the speaker circuit and doing all those sort of like Catholic musician things. Fell madly in love with an evangelical girl, chased her for like 3 years, and finally got to the point where she was like ready to say yes. We're about to get engaged, and I fell very ill with a fungal infection that nobody could diagnose. Like I learned about this maybe like about in 2022, but this was, back in like 2014. So like 8 years of this illness that nobody really had any idea what to do with. And one of the symptoms was I would go through these like 3-month-long bouts of flare-ups where I could not sleep at all. It was like, 20 minutes a night, 2 hours a night type thing. And lots of other sort of strange hallucinogenic type. I guess if you think about like, fungus, like if somebody's on shrooms, but all the time and their body's like manufacturing all of those like, toxins and things, like it was basically like being on a bad trip all the time. And so it was just like living in a hellscape, and all of my life fell apart. I kind of hit a rock bottom. I lost the relationship that I had, the career that I like was building, and it was really kind of torn down to the bolts in a way. And in the midst of that, I really found myself, one, the only thing that I could do was write and like kind of do media, and that was actually the beginning of my like career in media. Was I had to find something else other than youth ministry, and church stuff, and so I could take freelance stuff, and that's what I started doing. But that was actually what led me to discovering the story of St. Maximilian Kolbe, and I can kind of stop there and sort of like go into that whole segment. I kind of just talked for a long time, but the main thing about getting started with this whole film was really that it was birthed inside of that more silent, almost like desert, the same way that like David's whole sort of career was birthed in the wilderness as he fought the lion and sang psalms. It was kind of the same thing, in that I discovered Kolbe's story and began to meditate on it at night when I would wake up with these sort of panic attacks, and found myself really like imagining what it would have been like to be inside of the cell with him and to grapple with this idea of, Kolbe saved the life of another man, but what about the 9 other men whose lives did not get saved? What does he say to them? What's his answer for why God would allow this to happen? And so that began to...
One of the things I wanted to mention about that, just sorry to cut you off, but
yeah.
First of all, spoiler alerts. I hope you're okay with that.
Yeah, go ahead.
At the point that this releases, the movie will have already been released.
Yeah.
One of the things that was very captivating about the movie is not only how did Maximilian treat the other men who were dying, talk to them, reconcile with them, help them reconcile with their own lives as they reach death, but also kind of the ongoing spiritual fight internal to Maximilian himself.
Yeah.
And as a priest, I teared up on 2 occasions that I remember explicitly, just like thinking about how his love, dude, the profound love he had for people that were against him, you know, that didn't like him, that didn't care for him, and then him having to wrestle with his own humanity.
Right.
So anyways, to your point, it's not just about how he treated others, but also kind of what was stood out to me was how the priest wrestled with his own soul, Maximilian, in that moment.
I mean, yeah, those are both sort of the planes of the priesthood, right? Like your own dialogue with God becomes the fountain out of which the ministry and love that you have pours into others. And so your own kind of working out your salvation with fear and trembling is the core of the priesthood, you know, like the rhythm of the liturgy of the hours and all of that. And so I really wanted to be like honest about what that was like, and imagine him as a priest, as flesh and blood, a real human being that had to go through that journey himself in order to minister to others.
Yeah, and I'm struck by the story that you just told. That sounds like very, very intense suffering that you experienced, Anthony, during your life. But it's in some ways not surprising to hear that this kind of fruit is what has come out of that suffering. It's a pattern that we see all over the Christian life. Obviously, it's the cross and resurrection, but it's also, I'm thinking of St. John of the Cross, who was imprisoned and just by his own brothers and in solitary confinement for like 9 months. But it was in that furnace of suffering that he ended up crafting some of his most beautiful and mystical poetry about the spiritual life. And so it's a really powerful testimony for those who might be going through a difficult time, but also it's a really just beautiful story. And so how was it exactly that you discovered St. Maximilian Kolbe in particular? Why? What was it about him and his story? You mentioned a little bit already of him being in the starvation chamber, but what was it about him? How did you encounter him, and what was it about him that stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I don't know, it's such a weird thing. I feel like there's this whole Catholic, I guess, trope that the saints sort of pick us, that we don't necessarily like know which ones are going to be the ones that like materialize, and it's kind of surprising how those devotions begin. For me, I was actually not Catholic really at the time. I was a professed atheist. I'd lost my faith, and I was one of these angry, very sarcastic like atheists that really kind of looked down on others and like lashed out at others because they kept on giving me these very pithy, very shallow statements about why God would kind of allow bad things to happen. And I just enjoyed kind of crushing them with my logic, you know. But
Wow.
Underneath all of that was this deep, deep feeling of abandonment by God. And I, at the same time of being angry with him, I just could not believe that a good God could exist given what I was experiencing. And so it was sort of in the midst of that, I was still very much in the Catholic world. And a lot of the clients that I was finding that were sort of startups that were hiring me were people who I had known through church. So I had these startups that were like for various reasons bringing me on, and one of them was dedicated to St. Maximilian Kolbe and asked me to do like a bio of him on the website that I was writing copy for. And because of that, I was just like, you know, doing some research on him, and I was struck by something that I saw on the Wikipedia page of all places that I had never heard before, which was that I knew he had sacrificed his life for another man. I even knew that he had been executed after 14 days. But it was sort of like this very high level, rather two-dimensional understanding of his story. But then there's this detail there that was shocking to me, which is that he actually survived with 4 other men all the way to the point where he was executed. So he was the last one to be killed, but there were 3 other men who were also executed just right next to him. And I just immediately like had this sort of like, I don't know, you guys went to seminary, you kind of understand the brotherhood that comes when men sort of suffer together. Anybody that has experienced like that sort of deep brotherhood that comes from sort of this love that you go through something together and you just now are like forged. And I just immediately had that sense like, what would that have been like for all these guys to say goodbye to each other in that moment, having survived for 14 days? What would, like, he had to have given them this amazing hope for them to be able to do that. For me, I had no hope. There's no way if I was thrown into a starvation bunker like that and I knew I was going to die, I would just kill myself. Like, there was no, like, to be honest, there was just like, that was a really clear kind of like, there's no purpose, there's no meaning to staying alive and suffering for that long. But at the same time, like, I want to know what he gave them that would have given that purpose to them. So it was like this kind of, I don't know, the stumbling block for the Gentiles that sort of Paul talks about is just this, wow, like that cross all of a sudden in some way is drawing me to this story. And I just began to kind of be obsessed with it and research more and more. Um, what was it that Kolbe was doing or giving? What was it about him that allowed these men to build this brotherhood in that place? And that was kind of why I was so interested in that particular, I guess, lens of the story. Particularly just because I think it's one of the more beautiful and dramatic parts of it that nobody really had investigated before or talked about to me.
So I wanted to bring up a couple of details that I remember from the film specifically that I thought were intriguing. Was one, kind of the atheistic attitude of at least two of the guys more aggressively. All of the guys had doubts to some extent, but there was one guy specifically that was very aggressive. There towards the end of the movie, he has a conversion process that's very powerful. So I wonder if you resonated with that kind of atheistic attitude of like denying hope, denying love, denying God, right? Even making fun of the gestures he would make of prayer and absolving confessions, a sign of the cross. He would think it was a silly gesture with empty completely of meaning, especially in that moment. So first I wanted to mention that if you resonated with that. And the second thing is, and I want to talk to you about this maybe after you answer this first question, the rock.
Right.
The detail of the rock in the movie. I thought that was not the Rock, Dwayne the Rock Johnson.
Yeah, the Rock shows up. He's actually in the movie.
He's actually in the movie. Spoiler alert: it's Maximilian Kolbe. No, just kidding. But there's this rock that shows up at the beginning of when they're incarcerated into this prison. That I thought was fascinating. I was like, oh, they're about to play with this rock as a concept of a weapon, and kind of the psychological battle the whole time they're in jail. So I don't know, those two things, I guess. Did you sympathize with the atheists in the room, especially given your own disbelief, given your own struggles? And then second of all, tell us a little bit about that rock. I'm just fascinated where that comes from.
Well, I mean, when I first met this story, that's exactly where I was. Like, it's I resonated with that character more than I resonated with Kolbe. I saw Kolbe in a way as like the foil or the nemesis to like what I was going through. And I wasn't endeared to him in the first part of the story, though I like was haunted by him. I think that it's if you look at like the culture of death in a way that was sort of promulgated at that that century, 20th century, the state of totalitarianism and atheism, that's still very present in our time. It's just with different faces and different costumes. And but if you look at like the suicide rates, the rates of depression, obviously the abortion and euthanasia, you can just see that we're living in this sort of quiet desperation, this age of hopelessness where people have no meaning or purpose to their suffering. And because of that, they go to all of these other sort of edge cases, like all of the things that are the big trigger topics of our age all have to do with like not knowing your identity, not knowing where you belong, not having a sense of who you are and who God is and where the world is. It's all this like confusion that just comes from removing God from the foundations of our culture. And I think that ultimately leads to this core question that everybody has to face because, frankly, humanity is permeated with suffering. Like the cross is regardless of whether you're a Christian or not, you are going to have a cross to bear. That's part of the grappling that we have with our own mortality and our condition. And Christ's call for us to pick up our cross is this call to sort of embrace it and accept it, and to be with him in it. But I think that Kolbe gives us an image of what that really means to pick up your cross and walk. And for me, I feel like the rock was this image of like taking the easy way out, right? Like if I don't believe in God, then the math of this world leads to like equals take your own life if there's nothing else that you can do to improve it.
That's right.
That's just like the truth of materialism. Like ultimately somebody's going to have to face why live when suffering is this hard. And so I think Colby's story is really like this great, like, I guess, contrast and foil to that whole idea.
Which is a really beautiful concept. You know, I think you're absolutely right that if materialism is true, I think it only leads to one of two options usually. Either just complete hedonism, like, all right, none of this matters. I'm going to get as much pleasure as I possibly can while I'm in this world. But then, of course, if you're in a situation like Maximilian Kolbe in a starvation chamber, there's not a lot of opportunity for pleasure. And so the other logical outcome, if you have the materialist worldview, is let's just end it. This is not worth it. Doesn't matter. Doesn't mean anything anyway. So yeah, that witness of St. Maximilian Kolbe of suffering heroically is it's so powerful. So
I would add one thing to that as well, which is that I think that like there is sort of this third thing in between, which is maybe not hedonism, but like a sort of social justice direction of like I want to do as much good and sort of create as much goodness in the world and shape the world to be a better place. But when you can't do that anymore, what meaning is there? Like if you don't have the power, if you're sort of facing the Nazi Reich and they've won, like there is no ability to sort of make the world a better place, right? And I think that's a really important sort of thing for me to grapple with too, because I don't think it's just like everybody who's an atheist just like only wants pleasure. I just think that at the end of the day, they're powerless to actually accomplish what they want to accomplish in the world, and they end up hitting that powerlessness as I did.
So I have a question for you. One of the reasons that I want to talk to you, Anthony, is first of all, and maybe I should say this up front, congratulations on the film, brother. You know, as a Catholic priest, I am so moved that there are yourself and others involved in a project at such a high quality level, trying to execute a storyline of a saint at a very high cinematic level. That to me just warms my heart. I think I was just talking to one of the deacons at my parish earlier today, who I just found out his dad had been serving in prison ministry for many, many years. And now he is a permanent deacon and he serves in prison ministry. And here soon I'll actually be entering into prison ministry. So the film kind of came to mind just for some reason while I was talking to him. But I told him, I said, hey, deacon, can we make sure that when we go visit the prisoners in a couple weeks that we take beautiful vestments and beautiful candles?
Yes.
And he told me, he said, yeah, of course. Of course. In fact, I wanted to talk to you about that. I said, because the soul needs more than just, the soul needs truth. So we're going to go there and preach, right? It needs goodness. So we'll go there and be kind to them, hug them, listen to them, be moral witnesses. But they also need beauty. And I can't give them much because there's so many things in a prison ministry that's so much security. But if I can take them beauty, then like, that's what I want to take them. Right. That's what I can have to offer, you know? And so, you doing that in your own way of trying to make the best film that you can with the budget and the personnel that you're given to draw people into the beauty of a saint's life, to me is very moving. And it's very much in line with kind of what we're about here on Logos Podcast. And I think it's just an awesome way to be Catholic and live your faith. So I wanted to, as I guess the segue that I wanted to enter into is in line with that is, why was film the way you decided to portray the faith? I mean, you talked about C.S. Lewis. Well, he's a writer. You know, he's not a script writer or a filmographer. Why not another medium? Why cinema? Why movies? Sorry, Joe, I didn't know if that's what you were going to ask. But
yeah, I want to know the same question and then what it was like trying to make this movie. But first, Father Max's question for sure.
Yeah, it's a good. They're two, I think, very tied together things, and I think cinema is very much like the modern cathedral. Not that it sort of replaces that place of liturgy, but the church has always understood that the liturgy is an immersion into the gospel. Like the ritual of the sacraments are themselves a way to immerse people in the story of God's salvation. And
Yep.
we do that with art and technology, right? Like at least in the medieval ages, like it was a new technology to have stained glass windows. Like, it's like a projector, right? I mean, obviously it's not like electronic, but they were sort of getting to that point where we're trying to almost make this this reality that is a new reality that people enter into as a part of understanding the story of God. And when people didn't actually weren't literate and didn't have the gospel to be able to read, there was this deep emphasis on the art on the walls. Like that was how people were being able to understand the stories. Human beings in general, our memory is encoded with stories. We're actually not very good at remembering historical facts or abstract ideas because we're incarnational and sensory people. And so we learn our language through stories. We learn all abstract concepts through stories, and remember them with images and like the senses. So I think that film is important because for those who are not going to enter into the cathedrals that we have, our culture has this other sort of ritual that is still very relevant, which is the theater. That is the place where we kind of meet the stories that help to shape our inner realities and our subconsciouses. And I knew as a youth minister that if my kids are spending 3 hours digesting media that is completely installing a software that's antagonistic to what we're trying to do, there's no way that parents can compete with that. There's no way that I as a youth minister with 1 hour a week with them can compete with that. Like, we have to be in that space and leading in that space. And I think, frankly, like we've been the best artists of all time. All of the best art has always been made sort of to encapsulate these stories of the gospel, particularly with that kind of liturgical sense in mind. And so it's I think, an absolute tragedy that we've sort of given up that sort of place of pride in all of our architecture and all of the things that we've done. I don't know, like we can go into why that happened, but film seems to be one of those places that we should be kind of shining that light. And I think as many Catholics, have always been, brutally aware of how disappointing it's been to constantly hear like, oh, there's this new Saint movie coming out, and it to either completely miss the point of the Saint's story and kind of like smuggle in some sort of political agenda, or on the other hand, to be this like embarrassing thing that I don't feel like I can share with anybody because it's cheesy, poorly written, poorly done, whatever.
And there are a lot of Christian films that are not very good.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, I've avoided it most of my life because it's excruciatingly painful to watch.
But the other thing that I think is really interesting about it is that like the way that the cathedrals of the world have been made. I mean, you look at the Duomo in Florentine, and even now the Florentines look at that and say, this is ours. Like they made that themselves. It was Florentine like architects and people who were part of the ecosystem, like the benefactors, the priests, the artisans, the carpenters, like every single part of the ecosystem was involved in collaborating to make the thing. And I think that film, generally speaking, the way that we've been doing it and trying to do it, part of the reason why it's always sucked or not happened very often is because it's not being done that way. It's a billionaire decides, hey, I want to make a story about like a saint, and then they go and hire like Hollywood people who are not necessarily Catholic to kind of run the whole thing because they don't know who to go to. They're not connected. They're not in community in any way with like artists that are like in their courts that they know. They're not like hanging out with the priests. They're not all in this one little like, ecosystem that are sort of building this whole thing together. Like, no, it's just sort of they export the whole thing to the whole system, and it chews through it and uses all the money and kind of like squanders it. But I think that if we want to sort of see a new renaissance take place in the church, then the way to do that is by these collaborative things, like pieces of art that involve more than like one person. Like if I was wanting to be a Tolkien, I could like be in my own home and spend 10 years writing a book. But it's not actually like building the economy of the church in a way that can like duplicate and build those sort of like connections that can lead to the conquering of culture. And frankly, like publishing houses are not going to be interested in sort of publishing this sort of thing again. Like that's not where the world is now. So I saw with the building of this whole thing that there was an opportunity here to kind of do for the church what the Chosen did for kind of the evangelical world, which is to sort of build a crowdsourced, crowdfunded, homemade, homebrewed like Catholic movie that set us up for a new Renaissance.
I think you're exactly right about the correlation between the liturgy and the theater. I find that really fascinating. You know, there's a theater by the seminary that Father Max and I went to that I would go to every once in a while during my time in seminary, and there's always this. Maybe you've seen it. Maybe it's a generic thing that's around the country, but all the lights dim at the beginning of the movie, and then there's this like Crosswood Cinema like trailer, and it's this woman who walks in and sits down in the seats, and the lights go off, and she's kind of narrating. But what she says something to the effect of, "We come here to the silver screen and we leave changed, like it's a transformative experience." And at first, when I saw that, I was like, that's a little bit corny. Like, are you really trying to convince me that coming to see this movie is going to transform my life? But
and it might be corny if you're watching Lilo and Stitch, you know what I mean?
But there's a profound truth there that we do not nearly as much as in the liturgy, right? When we come to the liturgy, we really participate in the story, and we're made contemporary to the story of salvation, and we're there at the Last Supper. We are there, you know, in the scriptures with the Lord. But there's something analogous, I think, that takes place in a movie. You enter into the story, and it does. You said it. It affects our consciousness and the lenses through which we view reality. So I am so grateful that Anthony, that you are out there, you know, creating good art for Catholics to see and experience and be nourished by. You mentioned the crowd-funded nature of this project. Talk to us a little bit about just the production of the film. How, I'm sure it was difficult. I'm sure you ran into obstacles, but I'm guessing there were also moments of grace along the way. Could you just share a little bit about what that was like?
Yeah, I mean, it was frankly kind of like miraculous the whole way through. And I don't say that lightly. Like, I think that can be like very overused in our culture. But
yeah.
If you think about like what Cabrini cost, for instance, I think that Cabrini was like, regardless of what you kind of think about the messaging of it, from a filmmaker's and craftsman's perspective, it was like a masterpiece. And we were sort of seeking with the ambition to make something that had that fine touch to it, that could stand up next to that. But that was made with $40 million. That's like more than the budget of the entire Civil War. You know what I mean? And so like we are in a place where we were trying to make our thing for $300,000, which is like so many multiples less than that. And when you think about like what a film is trying to do, you're trying to sort of reconform reality to sort of behave in order for you to tell this sort of immersive story. And if anyone has ever thrown an event, like throwing a liturgy, throwing a retreat, throwing a wedding is probably a really good example of this. It's like reality just doesn't behave, right? Like things go wrong, like things with the venue fall through, like your vendor falls through. All the tablecloths ended up being in a like different, you know, location. They got sent to like your mom's house in like, you know, Canada instead of like to this place. And now you're like, what do I do? And so basically it's like there's two things that can help you solve problems when you're trying to sort of make reality conform like this. One is money. Like, I need more time. I need more, like, I need to order new tablecloths or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. We're gonna reschedule, and it's gonna cost $100,000, but we have the money, so we can do that. That's why budgets are so high. And when you think about, okay, like we want to recreate New York City, or we want to recreate Auschwitz, every single thing on screen was paid for, was scheduled, was like meticulously planned. Even just that shot where somebody like walks down the road, gets out of the car and the whatever, and there's 10 other cars happening, people walking around, every costume, everything they're wearing, like all of that was planned, scheduled, paid for, right? So if all of a sudden you have a thunderstorm on that day, and the next scene that you're shooting, which is inside of the house, is you can see outside that it's like bright and sunny, and that's like a part of the story, then you have to reschedule that entire day. You can't shoot that scene on that thing with like rain and clouds and all that. So it's actually kind of like this weird juggling act where if one thing goes wrong, everything gets like thrown into this like unbelievable pit of like stew of chaos. And so for us, like our process of doing this without money meant we just had to have people that were constantly willing to rescue us from the problems. Like we basically, you know, as this first time group of filmmakers, one, we have no track record, we have no like, you know, nothing to rely on that says we're going to be able to make the money back for anybody that wants to invest. And we basically got to get people to give us a mortgage for a nice house, right? Like I'm going around being like, "Will you give me a house? Will you give me a house?" Like it's kind of a big like a big thing to ask for.
But at least a house you can justify. You're like, okay, this man can live
Right,
somewhere.
exactly.
With like a movie, you're like, I have like scripts and ideas, you know?
Right. And it's just like think about the craziness of like, but I'm going to tell this story that normally would take $40 million to tell, and I've never done this before, and I'm going to Poland to do it. I don't know the language. You know, it's like it's absolutely crazy. Every single person that I talk to is like, do not do this. Don't start with your first movie being an Auschwitz movie. Like you don't get forgiven for mistakes in that genre. Don't like go to Poland and shoot this. This is all completely impossible for this budget. And I mean, frankly, it was impossible for that budget. But I think that like God brought people to us who saw that God was doing something. And like, I can't say enough, like how grateful I am that there's a new sort of generation of wealthy Catholics that are starting to be patrons of the arts again and that care about this, because there were people, particularly in Dallas, like within just one friend group in this one little area of Irving around UD. There's quite a few wealthy Catholics that are doing some amazing things, and inside of that group, we raised the $300,000 in the course of like 3 weeks, which was completely unexpected. And I had a deal with them that I would shoot the movie if we finished fundraising that spring, with absolutely no faith at all that that was going to happen. And all of a sudden, when we got that call with the final like donation, somebody was like, "How much do you have left?" And I was like, "About 150 grand." And he was like, "Done. I'm writing you a check. It's going to be in your bank account like this week." I was like, "I can't believe this is happening."
That's
so
crazy.
I called my producer, who is somebody that worked on The Chosen, and she was like, I was like, "Hey, like we're doing it. Like get ready, because from now on, we're pulling all-nighters like it's final week, like until this thing is done." And that's kind of been the case. So we started calling people in Poland. We're like, does anybody know anyone in Poland that's Catholic?
Yeah. How do you make those calls?
like
You're like,
putting-
hey, you're like, Cześć Boża.
Hey,
I
good
don't
job,
know
man.
your language.
Yeah. No. Honestly, we posted on Facebook. We like, guys, I'm telling you, it's the mom Facebook group. It's like Catholic
dude.
moms, the Catholic homeschool community. Of course, somebody went to Poland to World Youth Day at one point and had a tour guide that was like, and now involved in the film industry, and like just, you know, it's like this grassroots thing. We put it out there like, hey, does anybody have miles that can get our team to Poland? Like we were basically just asking for Catholics to kind of come together and give us what we needed to make it happen. And every ask like turned into the thing that we needed. All the way through the project. Like, you know, we need miles tomorrow. Can somebody find us a way to get like 50,000 miles to get these 3 people to Poland? And it would somehow miraculously just show up on our doorstep the next day. And so I guess it was just this amazing experience of like poverty. When we got there, you know, most movies are done with this sort of rigid hierarchical structure. We did it with, you know, and actors are like demanding trailers and certain kind of like things. And not that all of that's bad, but we got to Poland as missionaries. And the DNA of this was like all these youth ministers that had like moved over into doing film. So it felt like a mission trip. Like we're all on these cots in this like big kind of shared space that was, you know, we didn't even have a dining room. Like it was like very humble settings. But all of us were kind of in that space. So instead of the director having his own trailer or his own room or his own bed, like I'm just on a cot, like with the actors myself. And it just created this kind of missional sense that everybody on the set had, and that led to, I think, on screen a sort of sense of like authenticity. So yeah, anyway.
There's a quote by Jonathan Paggio, which I think we've said before. I just want to bring up again. He says he was at a talk at Ralston College, and it was talking to like young creatives and business professionals, and he told them, he says, in order for you to be successful in what you're doing, you have to be willing to be poor.
Right.
Especially as a person entering into the craft of the arts, and as you're telling me this story now, Anthony, it reminds me even our own beginnings, humble beginnings, it sounds like y'all really got after it in a short period of time, which is really actually, I'm sure in the moment it's like, this sucks. It's hot out here and I wish I had more money and better food or whatever. But because you were willing to be poor, our Lord knew your intention, and Saint Maximilian Kolbe and our Blessed Mother seems to have blessed it. But it really requires tethering to reality, right? A humility, humus, right? To be down to the earth, to be willing to then produce a fruit that our Lord has in store. First of all, going back to your, sufferings earlier in your life with the fungus medical issue you had, that kind of was a suffering that somehow catapulted this spirit in you to dive into and understand then the kind of despair that may have happened in the prison at Auschwitz with Maximilian Kolbe in there, that then led to you now entering into this camp at random Auschwitz, or in Poland, or wherever you went to go film. Wherever you had to travel, you had to have the humility yet again to say, hey, I really believe in this.
Right.
And that's a very beautiful thing.
It was a beautiful thing. I mean, anybody that's experienced being on mission with people in a poor way is actually, I don't know, it's like hard to describe the joy that kind of comes from that. Like, I think some of the greatest, most beautiful memories of my life were moments of being a camp counselor and seeing God move in kind of the amazing intimacy of that poverty. Mission trips where we were living with the poor. I think that God really does have this amazing like power in weakness, and I think that our greatest asset, kind of like Gideon's army, was the fact that we like went to battle impoverished, because despite the like insanity of it, like those who were anointed for this like mission in this battle were like I don't know, they loved every minute of it. It became kind of like a part of their identity together. And I think that all of us, I mean, all the actors, this never happens, right? Like people, it's such a gig world and so transitory. Like all of us are still messaging each other daily on WhatsApp in our group, like almost every day, because we love each other, like we experienced God together in a way that built like real life community. And I mean, those of you who saw the movie, it's like these guys have to get really vulnerable with their presentations of like their own suffering in the, I guess, the context of Auschwitz. And so we had to get
they were great actors, by the way.
Yeah.
And actors.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, this is, wow, they're really selling the film here.
Yeah,
I feel bad for that guy for that experience he shared as a child or with his girlfriend, wife, whatever. I mean, it's really impressive.
I mean, part of that came just because we were living with that level of intimacy with each other that we could go there. I think that everybody was a good actor, but it was also sort of multiplied in the power of it because like there was no ego, there was no competition, there was no sense of all the normal things that in film kind of make something feel like fake, just because we were living as we were acting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's also, to me, it's a powerful testimony of what is now possible in this in the 21st century in the Catholic Church, right? Like we truly believe that the Catholic Church is, I mean, it's universal. We are a family that is not bound by borders or geography. And so the fact that you were able to tap into the family that is the Catholic Church for the support, depending on divine providence, as you did, it really gets me excited about what might be possible for you in the future with whatever your next project might be. I know you probably don't want to think about that right now. You probably just want to like sleep for a little bit. but seriously, for artists and creators in the future, we have this incredible capacity now to communicate across time and space and to be in touch with the Universal Church, which we should definitely take advantage of.
I mean, I'm getting chills as you're saying that. I love having these conversations because they sort of help me process things that, like, as you say that, it's like the most obvious thing in the world to me, but it wasn't something that I was thinking about before. Um, but it really is true. Like, I did not have any comprehension. I've heard so many times that God will provide, or like, you know, God has all the money in his hands, the things that you need to sort of accomplish the mission. Um, and what I've experienced in this has been like that that's totally true. And it's like such a strange thing about the way that stepping out in faith has allowed me to see God's faithfulness in the midst of this mission. Like, I had no idea that when I was sort of putting this together, that there were investors that would have like that loved St. Maximilian Kolbe and couldn't wait for his story to be told, and were sort of being prepared for like this moment. You know, I had no idea that over in Poland there was this actor, Martian, who plays Kolbe, that had like the same time that I was going through the process of writing the movie, My Dark Night of the Soul, was hitting rock bottom because of his alcoholism, losing his family, and getting into AA, where God met him, and Colby, being the patron saint of addicts, became sort of his patron. And that, you know, as his life was sort of coming back together, that he was like having it on his heart to somehow devote part of his life and his story to telling Colby's story. You know, it's like all this invisible connectivity that God is like building up in the faithfulness of his people, that really took somebody just sort of like planting the flag without any sense of like where all of that was going to come from, you know, to say like, this is the moment, like God is calling us to do this now. And then everybody's just like rallying to the flag because they've been prepared for that as well. I think that there is something so unique in this particular moment in time that is happening, that God has sort of been preparing us for, and building these like perspectives, all of these people who are kind of like growing up in the church in different places, that are now getting into positions of leadership, that have like a craftsmanship that they, you know, have grown, that are now like ready to be sort of like turned online and activated. So yeah, I think it's going to be, this moment is going to be the beginning of like, you know, we're going to start seeing like 5-10 movies coming out every year about saints that are like, you know, actually really good, you know.
Yeah, please God. Please God.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a quick question. Is there a particular scene in the movie that you were like, you I mean, I'm sure you prayed with every scene of the movie, but maybe a scene specifically that stood out to you of the film?
Wow, yeah. I mean, it's so hard to sort of like pick one out of that, because they're all moments that took such a deep level of kind of like meditation and like connectivity to kind of create. But I would say that the dream sequence where there is this character Albert, who's kind of the atheist, the troubled man that is most sarcastic against Colby, who was this young romantic guy who had this idealism that he was kind of going to save Poland and be the white knight that kind of came in and helped save it from Germany, and then of course is defeated, broken in Auschwitz, and is now in the cell and is like in total despair. A big part of his story is this kind of love that he has back at home, that he kind of betrayed by going to war, and that he left behind, and that he's not going to get to say goodbye to. And a third, I guess, through the movie, he has this dream where he thinks that he's back at home with her, that he got released, that he's getting to live his life, and we get to sort of see this glimpse of what that life could have been like if he had never gone to war, or if he got released. And it's so beautiful. Like, you just feel how like gorgeous that life could have been. You feel it with him, and then all of a sudden he's just like ripped out of that, and you realize that he's not free at all, like with him, and that he's actually still in the starvation bunker, and that he's like still going to die. And he just freaks out, like a total panic attack, in like the ugliest, grittiest, hard to watch kind of thing that, you know. And if you've ever seen somebody kind of have something like a psychological break, like that's what happens. And Colby seeing this happen, like as he's sort of banging on the cell door, like I guess part of the inspiration of this was that when I was actually in the cell, looking at the cell, they still have the door there that was like originally there, and there's claw marks, like fingernails have clawed against the door to try to like, open up, and you just feel like looking at it, like the terror of like the human beings that were in this place. And I was just like, I have to depict that. Like I can't shy away from what that desperation must have been like in the cell. So that was like the inspiration for this moment. And Kolbe, in his love, sort of comes over to him as he's having this psychological break and sort of holds him and calms him down and like prays over him until he falls asleep. And I think that that was one of those moments where I really felt like the ministry of Kolbe coming alive in front of me in a way that was just like, I don't know. When we left that scene and walked out outside, there were these people who were watching on the monitor that were just sort of like weeping together, holding each other because of how beautiful and how terrible it was, kind of at the same time. And I think that anyway, it was just like I felt like it was sacred ground, like both the most vulnerable thing perhaps I had seen to that point, and then also the most loving thing I had seen.
It also put into perspective for me that scene again, that fatherly identity,
right?
of Saint Maximilian, and I would say like that was the biggest, just as a priest, like it was just so beautiful, man. The depiction, again, I'm sure many people can relate to the film and just meditate on the life, but as a priest, just to see a man like that that's really willing to father a suffering child of his who's experiencing so many things, and put aside the ugly, nasty parts of the specific moment in his life, and just willing to welcome him and love him and forgive him and comfort him. It's just so powerful, man. That scene was particularly powerful. I admit to you. I think it's beautiful.
I mean, one of the other ones was like, I mean, not to sort of spoil the ending, but we get a little glimpse of heaven, little Easter egg kind of surprise if you stick around post kind of cut to black, fade to black. And
we don't see color, but
right. Yeah, we got to sort of like play that out a little bit, and it's I'll just say that being in that room felt like actually getting to be in heaven for like a minute and a half in a way that was like led to conversions happening even on set in a way that was like kind of set us all off for the journey that we were about to go on. So yeah.
Anthony, I want to give you the opportunity to tell our listeners how they can find this movie, how they can support this movie. But before I do that, maybe just one final question. What would you, I know you yourself are still a young filmmaker and that this is your first film, but after having gone through this process, what would you say to people who have a similar desire? What advice would you give to them in their endeavor to produce beautiful Catholic art like this?
And I would maybe some practical advice too.
Okay. Right? Well, both of them are, I think it's all tied together. Like, I think hope is actually the core creative virtue. And it really is amazing because it requires, you have to be so vulnerable to sort of put a creative vision out there, especially if it's like film, because you have to get collaborators to be able to make it. You can't make film alone. And so I would say, one, believe that it can be done if God has given you a vision. Two, do not attempt it if it wouldn't, I guess, if it's not going to kill you to not do it, then don't do it. That this has to be a call that will like burn in your soul until you like kind of die or get it done. If it's a real call, because it's so hard, and it's so intense and requires so much risk and so much faith that a sort of like tertiary interest in film or like a curiosity about it is not enough to be the one to sort of put this thing together. But if it is that, no matter how poor or impoverished or whatever that you are, like have faith that God is going to equip you to do the thing, and actually put it out there, and don't wait. Don't like, everybody I think is waiting for permission, for money, for whatever. Like in your poverty, just start doing it and start asking for help. That's really what it takes.
That's awesome. Thank you for that witness, and hopefully if there are creatives listening to this, that they find that helpful. Okay, now tell our listeners, what can we do? I know this isn't a normal movie, so how do we watch this movie? Where do we find it? What should we do?
Yeah, so it kind of depends a little bit on the life cycle of like when the podcast comes out.
Mm-hmm.
So the best thing to do is just go to our website, triumphtheheart.com, and at any given time we'll have like the way to watch the movie kind of presented there.
Okay.
From September 12th through mid-October is our theatrical window. Our goal is to have people going to theaters, filling those theaters up, and therefore getting more screenings and sort of growing. We're going to do a very limited theatrical release that was sort of crowdfunded, where all of these buyouts happened and people are giving us like these beachheads in different cities that are getting us into the theaters. From there, hopefully those theaters open up more screenings. We're encouraging them to kind of call their local theaters and say, hey, like, open up a screening for this. We'd love to see it. We've got a community, a parish, whatever, that wants to go and see it, make it happen. We'll fill the theater. That actually really does make an impact. But I would say that, yeah, if it's not coming out in your area, if you make the call, but there will also be other ways that you can stream it or whatever in October after that.
Sweet.
Okay, that's exciting. Yeah, hopefully, I think we may be able to get this podcast out during that window. So maybe that'll encourage people to get out there and try to get that movie into theaters, get some more screening times up. We wanna help it as much as we can, and we do want people going to the theater because, as you mentioned, that's even that. I was reflecting on this when you were talking about the comparison with the liturgy and cinema. The liturgy is inherently communal. We come together to do it. So often cinema nowadays is done individually in isolation on my couch with my Netflix. And so there is something very important about coming to a public
And also, it's also
space.
incarnational, right? It's also
Right.
incarnational.
That's right.
So there's that level of where like the liturgy requires us to be involved. That's why like watching a mass online isn't validly attending mass, right?
Yeah.
With a movie, something similar, like just looking at it from afar, it's like go to the cinema, go hang out with people, go live the movie a little bit. Experience it there in live. So
The
yeah,
really
man.
cool thing about it is that it's the whole movie happens like in a box in a way, like it's in a cell in a dark room. And the amazing thing about like the way that we sort of created the soundscape of it is that you will not get this effect if you watch it at home with two speakers, because you're basically listening to it in front of you. So there's a distance that it creates. But in the theatrical kind of 5-1 sound system, you're basically immersed in what they are hearing. And that's more important for this movie than like most other movies that you've watched. And the experience of it, watching it with people kind of huddled together in the darkness in the cell, it's really different because all of those people will start to have these like spiritual experiences and they'll start to kind of emote. And that like spreads. And so it creates this like chain reaction of like more and more, I guess, intensity, more energy, more power, more grace. And then the conversations that are able to sort of happen with that freshness, like outside, really can't be had like, without that freshness being gone. It's like when we went to go and see The Passion of the Christ when it first came out, people went in groups as parishes, and there was this kind of amazing thing that happened afterwards as people kind of got into these small groups and sort of digested the movie together. So you don't want to miss that moment. If this is around you where it's coming out in a local theater, you really want to be there to sort of experience it with your community.
100%.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Anthony, for what you do, man, for being, again, a witness to beauty, which we always call our listeners to be, and to live it as they can. We're big believers of the arts, of the beauty, and of the beauty. And thank you for what you do, Anthony, for your project. And St. Maximilian Kolbe, a great saint, the patron saint of journalists as well, right, of journalism. So we ask for his intercession as this movie, and God bless you and your project, man. Keep doing what you're doing. Excited for kind of what people are saying about it. People are already speaking very highly of it. I've had a chance again to see it at least a little bit, the pre-screening, and it's really incredible. And I'm so happy to see something like this produced. So congratulations to you and your team, man.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for your priesthood, guys. I mean, I think that the sacrifices that you've made to be fathers is it's such an important part of like restoring the fatherhood of God in the world. And like Maximilian Kolbe, like you guys get to be that face of love of God to all of us who are sort of in suffering and have kind of the questions and the doubts and all of that. So grateful for your fatherhood, for your yes to the Lord, and for what you're doing with this podcast, for your mission. So keep it up.
Thanks, man. It's been such a privilege to speak with you, and listeners, go see Triumph of the Heart.
Yo.
Amen.
Yeah, man. Well, for all those who have tuned in, Anthony, again, one last thank you to you. And a round of applause. All right. It's kind of awkward because I'm like by myself.
You're the only rounder, but
yeah. One round of one applause up in here. All right.
Amen. Yeah,
hey, listen, you didn't make it a Warped Tour, but you know what you did make it? You made it to the American cinema screen, brother.
Yeah,
so
that's
congratulations,
amazing.
man.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, man. So, guys, as always, we hope this episode brought you closer to the logo of Jesus Christ. Go out, watch the film, support our project as you can, as you want. And even if you don't want, pray about it and then support it.
Amen.
So as always, guys, Logos Podcast. God bless you.
God bless.